It's hard to imagine this is how 2020 started. But across the world, dozens were falling ill with a mysterious virus that would ultimately change life as we know it.
Well, I'll never forget those days leading up to the onset of the pandemic. I got a call from Dr. Kieran Moore, who was our medical officer of health here in the Kingston region. You know, and he and I would chat maybe once every 5 or 6 months, usually just on, different public health campaigns. It wasn't really something that, he did a good job, but, public health was hardly something that was the top of my radar. And I remember that he called me and he said, I need to tell you about what's coming. And I remember over those, we probably chatted for about 10 minutes and kind of laying out what was ahead. And I remember after that phone call, I said, that's crazy. There's no way that actually can be what's ahead of us. And I thought it was kind of like an extreme worst case scenario, and he was just trying to give me, kind of scare me a bit. But honestly, almost everything that he told me on that phone call was exactly what's happened over the last year and a half about universities and colleges going online, businesses going bankrupt, people having to lock down, wearing face masks, all of this stuff that was so strange at the time. But I remember after that phone call, it was probably only about a couple of days, and then things started to cascade. I remember the dominoes starting to fall. And pretty soon, we're in a provincial state of emergency, and I'm giving a first video update to the community about what life is with COVID now. And it's hard to believe everything that's happened since.
Did we see this? Did we ever predict this? Absolutely not. But when things started to hit Canada in March, that's when people started to recognize we've got something serious here. People are, in Asia specifically, were dying in large numbers. People were being affected by it in large numbers. And when the state of emergency was declared here in March of 2020, businesses were absolutely not prepared for this. Businesses had to shut down. They had no income. When you look at a restaurant that's used to putting hundreds of people a day through their restaurant, and all of a sudden, sorry, you can't open your doors anymore. A lot of these restaurants, their takeout, if they had takeout, was a very small component. And it took a while for these businesses to adjust.
Well, I think from an economic standpoint, our small to mid-sized businesses were already struggling and challenged by staffing shortages and labor shortages across Canada. That's nothing new. And I think the pandemic has basically just exacerbated that problem with staffing shortages, training opportunities, and being able to pivot quickly to manage throughout the pandemic. And I don't see that getting better right now as we enter into our 6th wave and are starting to try and recover our economy.
In Lanark County, the retail sector was probably hit the hardest, but there's a ripple effect. And a year and a half, almost 2 years in, we're seeing the supply chain problem now affecting a lot of our manufacturers. We're finding that a significant portion of the population is saying, I don't want to go back to work because I can maybe work from home, or maybe I can just survive in my family quite nicely without this secondary income. The secondary income is often impacted by high childcare costs.
I mean, when we've seen the stress on the supply chain, I think a lot of businesses in our area really quickly adapted and were able to produce those locally grown, locally manufactured items that were in high demand. We have so many clients and businesses that, quickly pivoted their business and started making hand sanitizer to supply Ottawa area hospitals. I mean, that's fantastic. So I think a lot of people went outside of their area of expertise where they normally wouldn't have because they felt uncomfortable about it, but realized that they had the ability, the skill, and the people around them to help them make that transition quite successfully.
The pandemic changed the way we work forever. It has brought a significant amount of urban outmigration from Ontario's largest cities to our rural and small urban centres. However, it didn't supply the people we need to support our SMEs. It drove up housing prices, affected our supply chains, and increased our infrastructure costs as people were looking for quality of life that a rural area can offer. The pandemic accelerated the change required to meet the future of work demands.
The community groups, particularly volunteer groups, suffered through the beginning and probably still are struggling raising funding to survive, whether it's a library, whether it's a cultural group, a music group, the Royal Canadian Legion, for example, and the struggles of lack of access from members and public to create funds for them.
You know, Kingston has always had a significant hospitality retail sector in terms of this community. It's, you know, with 2 universities and a college here, and also being a tourist destination, that infrastructure has been in place, particularly in the downtown core. I don't think there's any businesses that weren't impacted by COVID, but I think particularly, and we are a downtown business, and in this downtown core, it was like a ghost town in Kingston in the early months in particular of COVID.
I went for a walk downtown, just needed to get some fresh air, and this was the beginning of May. So we'd been in lockdown for a month and a half at this point. And to walk downtown and to really see nobody on the streets on a beautiful spring day, to see the number of handwritten signs in restaurants or in stores notifying consumers that they were closed indefinitely. It was heart-wrenching to see window displays from the March Briar still up, and it was a very humbling, worrisome moment, as we still didn't know by the beginning of May exactly how quickly we'd be coming out or when.
I agree that I think it served a purpose. We had to have that, because if you look at what happened during the last pandemic of 1918, it was devastating, absolutely devastating. It took years and years to come back. I think the American government and the Canadian government have dealt with it right. They kept the money moving. But that said, it has to draw back, and that's happening right now. As far as getting people working, I think perhaps we need to pay a little bit more to some of these people and have better safety nets for some of these people. We need to think about immigration, because we need more workers here, period. It's not just a question of jobs out there. Sometimes it's jobs people just won't do. For example, greenhouses jobs, picking jobs. Like they have to bring immigrants in, just even seasonal workers, because people won't do it. So we have to find some way to get incentives for people to get out there and get back to work again.
And now when you come to the newcomers and refugees, 2 things has been affected so much and dramatically. One of them is the settlement itself, from the social aspect, and even from also finding a house or something for them. And then the second thing is losing those who were lucky to find jobs, losing the job in a couple of days, and those who are looking for jobs are not able to find any jobs. And finding a job and working for the newcomers and refugees means a lot of things. It means settlement, it means self-satisfaction, it means also a kind of a way of welcoming them in the country, because you come and you are coming as a refugee and you don't know if people like you or not. But if you start working, this is a kind of an objective proof that the country is welcoming you.
We really need to figure out, how do we take immigration, make it easier for people to get into this country, to fill the jobs that are available, that other people can't do, won't do. When you look at here locally, there's supposedly 2,000 manufacturing jobs available. I can guarantee you that if we had a simpler and easier process for people to come into Canada and fill those kinds of jobs, we could probably fill them within a year, if the process was right, if it made it easier. Pre-pandemic, we were already struggling with a workforce. So lots of jobs, not enough people to fill. It just got exacerbated by COVID, because people chose to remain from home, working from home, or took on a different line of work too. We saw that. We saw a shift from people who were working a traditional job, whether it be manufacturing or retail. They shifted to a job that allowed them to work from home remotely, online type of thing. So they're not going to return to those retail and those manufacturing environments because they found something that's a better fit for them now because of what everybody has experienced, what business has experienced.
The businesses that took out this extra debt, they have to be in a better financial position come time to repay than they were before the pandemic, because now they've taken on that extra debt load. So, I mean, they've had to adapt, they've had to face this crisis, and now they have to increase their revenue enough to be able to pay back this debt. And in all likelihood, that's where some of their biggest struggles are going to come. So I think that's going to have to be something that's going to have to be very well managed, and I think that's where the assistance for businesses is going to have to come starting now for the next several years.
The SMEs still need our support. They still need supports from the government. They still need supports from agencies and organizations like ourselves. This is an ongoing problem, and they are trying to recover. We've seen an incredible amount of resiliency with our SMEs. We've seen a lot of small businesses, unfortunately, who are no longer with us, have had to close, but we also see some who are struggling to just hang on. They need our support now more than ever. And I think it's important to really emphasize that without that, they're not going to make it through this. They really aren't. What we're seeing now is that we need to continue providing flexibility in options for those financial supports for these businesses. We need to be able to continue to offer other business services and consulting services to help them manage their way through this. This is unprecedented times. And a lot of them don't have the background or the knowledge on how to deal with that.
So we went from that moment of instant realization that of the severity of the situation, and not just in terms of the disease and our health, but business, economy, employment, and all of the other pieces, to realizing that we lived in an amazing community that is really filled with creativity, collaboration, real meaningful partnerships. And that, I think, fed our souls through this whole time, is that feeling that we were making a difference. It was different. It was a different difference, but we were making a difference.
It's one of those moments where when you're facing a crisis, there can be a natural tendency to kind of go insular and basically say, what do we have to do as an individual or as an organization to kind of get through this? But I think that cooperation and coordination is absolutely critical. Maybe when you hear that comment about, you don't want to waste a good crisis. Really, in this moment, it was that crisis that really taught us to work together in ways that we had never done before. And even now, today, a year and a half later, even looking post-pandemic, I think that the number one conclusion we come to is that we don't want to lose that. So we're already talking about what do we put in place so we can continue to work together and to coordinate, because I think we saw the value and the power of that.
Honestly, silos have no place in this type of economic crisis, in trying to recover from a pandemic. And this working across silos and working with our partners couldn't have been more important for our SMEs.
There has to be something positive come out of this pandemic experience. It can't be all bad. And I think it's forced us all to elevate our game and to become more tuned to the advantages of technology. Also, I think perhaps more important is understanding the needs of the employee. Lots of people have hidden issues, hidden concerns, and the pandemic has brought some of those out. So you find a way to adapt so you can be a more workforce-friendly employer. And so I think employers are embracing that. I don't think they have any choice but to embrace that and figure their way forward to make that accommodation possible, or else they will continue to have problems attracting people.
The businesses themselves were remarkably resilient and actually coped better than we thought they would. We feared closures and bankruptcies and failures, and we didn't see that. We saw a spirit of the challenge and reacting to the times, which was quite refreshing. Again, none of us understood what was ahead. So it's a tribute to their entrepreneurial skill and spirit.
I'm incredibly optimistic about how our economy is going to rebound after this. I think that the right people are looking at it in the right way. I think that the right agencies and organizations like ourselves are incredibly positioned to help support these businesses as they rebound. This is an opportunity for us to actually really regrow our economy and to make it better than it was before. If nothing else, the pandemic has caused us all to look at things differently. So status quo is no longer okay, and it is time for change, and this is an ideal time to do that. And I am thrilled to see some of our small businesses just reaching out and looking at those opportunities and trying to take that change driving step. And the organizations like Community Futures and others are able to help support them. Whether the government is able to pivot as quickly as we are is another thing, and we're hoping that they are. We think that their support is continuing on with us, and in terms of our partnership with FedDev, we've been incredibly open and transparent. They've been able to help us help our businesses in our communities and our SMEs. And again, it's about having those partnerships across those silos to help with the economy.
We need skills development, investment in our rural communities and small urban centers. We need to ensure our local communities can thrive in the post-pandemic economy. Our SMEs are the economic engines of Ontario. We must help them tread the path to post-pandemic recovery. Accomplishing this won't be easy, but if we are working together as a community across silos, building bridges, anything is possible.